Hello, in today's video I'm gonna show you exactly step by step how I created this gibbous moon composite image that I have recently posted on my Instagram. This is actually a second image of this type. When I posted a first one a couple of months back, I had a poll on Instagram whether you would be interested to see how I pull that off using a mono camera with LRGB filters, and a lot of you said that yes, it would be great if I make that video. So after a couple of months and another sort of similar image posted on social media, I'm finally doing that. I'm going to break down how exactly to do that with a mono camera, because especially with a mono camera, it's kind of tricky. These kind of sort of moon and planetary images are better made with one-shot color cameras, like maybe even DSLRs or mirrorless cameras, or astronomy dedicated one-shot color cameras. However, with a mono camera, it is still possible. There are some issues that you need to overcome in order to do that, which I'm going to dive into in today's video exactly. And I'm going to show you sort of my process step by step, so you can sort of get inspired yourself. I was doing that using the ZWO ASI 294mm Pro mono camera, which is this camera from that box right here behind me. And I was using my William Optics GT81 triplet refractor telescope. So yeah, let's dive in and let me show you, sort of talk you through step by step how I acquired this image and how I came up with the final image. So let's get to it. Okay, so at first we need to, of course, capture our images, and because I was using a go-to mount, computer's go-to mount, and a telescope and a dedicated astro camera with a filter wheel, which is also motorized, I was using the sort of go-to software for planetary imaging, which is FireCapture. You don't need to use FireCapture to capture images. If you're doing that, especially with a DSLR and a telephoto lens, like you could use a telephoto lens, not a problem. And you could use an intervalometer or just shoot like a video clip on your camera. But if you're using a dedicated astro camera, if you have a mono camera, so this is the main subject of the video, then you should probably take a look at FireCapture. This allows you to record short sort of video recordings of sort of the point of region of interest, because it's usually pointless to shoot the entire frame, especially with something like 294mm Pro, which in bin 1 has a huge resolution. If you try to record a clip with sort of full resolution, it would be humongous. The file sizes would be huge and it would be such a pain for your computer to process them. So using the ROI, region of interest feature in FireCapture, I could just easily select around the moon, the sort of the margin that I would like to have in the final photo, and then I could take a few recordings. So I used both, sort of all of the four LRGB filters: luminance, red, green, and blue. I used Nina to switch between filters in my filter wheel, which is what I usually do for deep sky imaging. And I used FireCapture to do the actual acquisition. So I think I took 4 clips, one per filter, each of them I think 1,000 frames long, which is, just a couple of seconds basically. And the exposure time, you just need to fiddle with it to make sure that you get enough brightness in, individual frames, but you don't overexpose any part of your images. So you just need to play around with that. It depends on the gain you set and the camera you're using, seeing conditions, and the telescope, the focal ratio of the telescope and whatnot. So don't suggest, I'm not even going to suggest a specific, now I don't even remember the specific exposure time. You just need to fiddle with the slider until you have the right looking histogram, and then just collect 4 recordings for different filters. And then we can start processing them. And the first step to process them is the software called PIPP, which is Planetary Imaging Preprocessor. I think this is a Windows only software. So if you're not using a telescope rig and you're just using a camera like a DSLR or mirrorless, if you want to use PIPP, be aware that it is only for Windows. And the other software, actually 2 more that I'm using in this workflow at the beginning before we go into the final Photoshop, are also Windows only. So I'm just usually doing that on my imaging PC, the little PC that is attached to my telescope. And then when that is ready, I bring it over to my main workstation, the macOS MacBook, where I finish it off in PixInsight and Photoshop. That's a little bit of a spoiler alert here for what I'm going to talk about here today. So The main sort of purpose of pre-processing in PIPP is to align the images, because even if you're using a go-to mount or any other tracker that tracks the moon, usually it's a good idea to realign those images anyway to make sure that the alignment is as good as possible. If you're not using a tracker and you're just using a tripod, which is also, I think, doable for moon images, then you would definitely need to realign those frames together in post-production as a first step. So I'm just loading all of those individual sort of 4 video recordings into PIPP, and then I'm outputting a series of TIFF images that are aligned. I'm not doing any rejection at this point. I'm just taking all of the frames that I have here, because the rejection will be done in the next software, which is AutoStakkert. And I'm not going to dive really deep into the settings of both AutoStakkert and PIPP, because there are already a bunch of videos on YouTube how to use these 2 pieces of software to create lunar images. So I will leave some links down below in the description. I don't really want to double the content which already exists on the platform. But like I said, the main idea of PIPP is to output a series of TIFF files that are aligned as good as possible. You could also do some cropping at this point, but I will leave cropping at later stages. So I'm just doing that series of aligned images, and then I'm loading them into AutoStakkert. And again, for every filter, so I have 4 sets of these images, so I will have 4 stacks. I will have a stacked image for luminance, stacked for red, green, and blue filters. So again, in AutoStakkert, just really basic stuff. You need to find some alignment points with a proper size, and you need to stack the images. At this point, I like to highlight 2 settings that I would change. One is that I'm using drizzling. Drizzling is basically an organic way to upscale your image, because I cropped in a little bit using the region of interest in FireCapture. I'm now upscaling my image a little bit to regain some of the lost resolution due to cropping, but doing that in an organic way and not digital upscaling, which is what drizzling is all about. I have a separate video actually about drizzling for astrophotography. It's an amazing sort of trick that us astrophotographers have. So I'm using 1.5 drizzle. You can also check that 2 times or 3 times. I don't really want to do too extreme here. I think 1.5 is good for my combination of camera and telescope and the size of the moon in the sky. And I'm taking 15% of the best images. So basically, out of the 1,000 frames per filter, again, I'm picking only 150. Right? Yeah, 150 images out of 1,000, and best ones that are, the most sharp, etc. And then I'm stacking these in AutoStakkert. The point of the rejection is because usually the atmosphere is wobbling more or less, but it's creating, this turbulence, and some of the frames might be sharper and better than the others. So the software can automatically sort of reject the worst ones and take only the very best ones, which is only 15% of what we have captured. Might seem like we're throwing away a lot and keeping very little, but it's actually a very good technique to capture a lot, and then you can get rid of a lot shitty data and keep only the very small amount of good data. So I'm creating 4 stacks, L, R, G, and B. And now here comes the tricky part, because the problem is that usually if you're doing deep sky imaging like galaxies or other broadband images with a mono camera like the 294mm Pro, you can just align them and you can just layer them on top of one another. You can do the LRGB combination in PixInsight and everything aligns perfectly. But with lunar images and planetary images in general, it's not that straightforward, because the atmosphere is wobbling. If you take a look at a single recording, couple of seconds of recording of a single channel, you can see how the atmosphere is sort of shaking and disturbing the image. And the stacking software that is AutoStakkert in this workflow is doing a local alignment, those little squares that you have in the process of stacking in AutoStakkert. These are sort of local alignment regions, and the software is actually doing some very minor sort of local warping of the images to make sure that when it stacks them, it retains sort of the data and the sharpness. Otherwise, if you don't do that and just stack them like you would stack deep sky images, you would lose a lot of sharpness and definition, and everything would just get smeared out because of the wobble of the atmosphere, and because those frames are technically a little bit different from one another because of the atmosphere wobbling. And because of that, when we have those 4 stacks and we try to do LRGB combination, we're going to get artifacts. And in order to prevent them, we need to do something in PixInsight. But actually, I forgot about one more thing, which is that we should sharpen up the image in a program called RegiStax. This is what I use. It's again one of the, it's actually the last one, a Windows only software that I run on my imaging PC. And that one is basically like a software to do some, crazy wavelet transformations to pretty much sharpen up your image. And this is awesome for planetary, like surfaces of planets, or the moon, maybe sun as well. I don't know. But for moon, it's perfect. And sort of the main idea with sharpening with LRGB data is to sharpen only the luminance channel and keep the RGB sort of not sharpened. And then when you do LRGB combination in PixInsight, it will pick up the sharpness from the luminance and then pick up the colors from the RGB. So the RegiStax sort of sharpening should be done only on the luminance channel. And I really am just eyeballing. There are a couple of sliders in RegiStax, and I'm just eyeballing what kind of difference all of these sliders are making to my image and try to come up with what I like best. The main rule of thumb here is to not overdo it, because you can get crazy with sharpening and thinking that, sharper is always better, but it's actually not. It might look good on the preview, but on the final image, it might look crap and over sharpened. So don't go too crazy on this step. It is tempting, but try to sort of calm yourself down and don't go overboard with sharpening. I can actually show you before and after how the luminance stack looks before sharpening and after sharpening, and the difference is definitely staggering. So it's definitely worth doing that step. And then I basically have 4 images. I have a sharpened stack of luminance and then unsharpened stacks of RG and B, and then I bring it to my main computer, the macOS MacBook, and then I'm loading them to PixInsight. So the first step is to actually do another round of alignment to make sure that when we do LRGB combination, we have as little artifacts as possible. Because if we just straight out did an LRGB combination, we would have a lot of artifacts, because all of these 4 channels were locally aligned sort of separately between one another. There is no consistency here. So in order to do that, we need to use a specialized script in PixInsight, which is called FFT registration, I believe. I think FFT stands for fast Fourier transform, but maybe not. Maybe that's just a coincidence. But it actually would make sense to use fast Fourier transform for such a thing. And it does some crazy registration alignment. I'm not going to even pretend that I understand what's happening there and how it works. It just works great. So you should use that for that use case. Basically, I am aligning R, G, and B to my luminance channel, the sharpened luminance channel, and then I'm going to use the output of that alignment to do the LRGB combination. So yeah, I'm doing that, and then after I'm done with the LRGB combination, there's just a process in PixInsight called LRGB combination. The result, Actually, no. There's one more step that I forgot about, and that is that we need to normalize our channels. Because if we did just an LRGB combination straight up after the FFT registration alignment, we would get some kind of color cast for sure. Like it would be a yellow cast or a red cast or a blue, green. Like the image would not be neutral. And if we want to go for this sort of mineral moon look, which is, nice colors of the moon where those colors actually lie, and not have a color cast of the entire globe, the entire moon, we need to make sure that all of these channels are normalized to each other so they are as neutral as possible. And then we can actually start bringing up the faint saturation of the actual colors that exist on the surface of the moon. These are not fake colors. These are actual colors of the surface of the moon, but they are just very, very dim and hard to see, and that's why if you just look at the moon with your eyes, you just see gray. But the colors are actually there. They're not fake. So in order to normalize these colors, we can use a process called linear fit in PixInsight. We can just open that and use the luminance as a reference and basically just drag the triangle to R, G, and B, and it will change the brightness, sort of fit linearly the image to match the brightness of the luminance. And then when we have those 4 images prepared this way, registered and linearly fitted, we can combine them using LRGB combination, and the output should be very, very gray, so sort of almost grayscale looking neutral image of the moon. And then we can start working on bringing out the saturation. And for that, I'm just using the curves tool. And basically what I'm doing is iteratively adding a little bit of saturation. I'm not trying to bring out all of the colors at one go. I'm doing a sort of incremental steps of bringing up the saturation curve a little bit, and then just applying repeatedly and seeing how the image is transforming, and then stopping when I'm pleased with the result. And pretty much after bringing up the saturation and maybe brightening up everything a little bit, I save this image, and this is one of the 4 images that we will be then combining into one composite image in Photoshop. So this is our moon image, basically. We also need 3 other images. If you want to use this, if you want to do this sort of gibbous moon or crescent moon kind of HDR look, you need 4 images. So one image is of the illuminated part of the gibbous moon or crescent moon. In my case, it was a gibbous moon. The second image is that you need an image of a full moon. You need to have done it sort of on another day. Previously, I just used an old image that I have taken with a camera lens with no like sharpening, no stacking, no nothing, just a single image. It's fine. Single image of a full moon. So that's our second image. Then the third image is an image of a star field that it could just be any star field. I think I was just using... I think I used one of the images of one of the galaxies that I was shooting in spring of 2022, and I just stretched it just a tiny bit so that the galaxy is pretty much not visible at all, and the galaxy is so tiny it's in the middle, so it's going to be covered by the moon, and then I'm just using the stars around it to have a star field sort of behind the moon. This is totally fake. This is not where the moon would have... I didn't even check if the moon could be sort of in front of these particular stars at any time of the universe. So this is completely fake. This sort of compositing the stars behind the moon is totally fake. And it's not possible to capture the stars behind the moon because there's just too much dynamic range. If you try to expose for the stars while having the moon in front of them, the image will just be completely blown out and completely white. It's just technically not possible to capture stars if you have a huge bright moon in front of them. So this is that. So this is our third image, the image of the star field, and then the final 4th image is the image of the gibbous moon that we have been processing and preparing sort of in the first part here, but sort of overexposed. So just take one image, I don't know, maybe 1 second should even be enough, so that it's overexposed and then it's creating this sort of glow around the moon, and we're going to use this glow to have this sort of nice glowy effect from the moon itself. And then pretty much in Photoshop, the last phase is to bring everything sort of together. So we need to align the gibbous moon with the full moon. It's not going to align perfectly again because the moon actually wobbles a little bit as it goes around the Earth. The moon is tightly locked with the Earth, which means that we always see the same face of the moon, the same sort of side of the moon, the close side, the far side of the moon, and the close side of the moon. Yeah, the side of the moon that we can only see. The other side, the far side, we can never see from Earth. But it's not perfectly always exactly the same side. It wobbles a little bit. I think it's called libration of the moon. You can look it up and on the internet and read all about it. But basically it means that the image of the full moon is not going to line up perfectly with the image of the gibbous moon. So you just need to do your best to make sure that the alignment, especially around the parts that the full moon will be sort of visible through a layer mask, that it would be as good as possible. So after doing that, you just need to blend them basically together. I was just using a soft brush in Photoshop to sort of make a good transition between my foreground sort of gibbous moon and my background full moon. Again, it's not possible to capture the dark side of the moon if you have so much brightness in the bright side of the moon. That's why we need a second layer of a full moon, and we need to darken it a little bit to sort of make this impression that it's actually the dark side sort of visible through sort of behind, not illuminated. It's also kind of fake, but that's why it's a composite image. It's not a real sort of what you could see or capture. It's a composite. Okay, don't judge me. So after blending that, we basically need to add the glow, and the glow is sort of behind these 2 layers in Photoshop. And the glow could also use some sort of a gradient mask to make sure that the glow only sort of happens on the side that is illuminated, to give the impression that the illuminated side of the moon is sort of glowing out into space and into the sort of darkness of the background. And then of course the background starts sort of behind everything, and right now you can see some layer masks that I used in my particular edit to pull off this final composite. And this is pretty much how this entire image is put together. So as you can see, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of images, it's a lot of preparation, because you need to have an image of the full moon sort of previously captured. You need to have a star field. You can actually capture the star field at the same night as you capture in the gibbous moon. Just point somewhere else with your telescope and capture a star field. That's not a problem. But you need to have a full moon sort of previously captured in order to put together this kind of a composite. And I think the effect is pretty awesome. A lot of people liked it on Instagram. It even got picked up on Astro Bin as a top pick sort of candidate. I don't think it's made to be top pick, unfortunately. But yeah, a lot of people liked it. So I wanted to put together this sort of video on how to do it, how I did it using LRGB sort of monochrome data from my 294mm Pro that you can see the box again behind me, and a telescope. And I think it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to do more composites like this, probably with different phases of the moon, maybe sort of half illuminated. So you have one half that is illuminated, one half that is dark, maybe some crescents. We'll see in the future. So this is how I did that. If you have any questions, something was unclear to you, hit me up in the comments down below. I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like down below. I would really appreciate it. And also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Again, I would definitely appreciate that. More videos to come, and the sort of new setup. By the way, how do you like this new studio setup? I'm using a different camera, different light, different background, different stuff. So if you are a long sort of viewer of the channel, let me know down below in the comments. What do you think about the changes? I think the light looks really well. This is finally a professional video light with a grid and stuff. So I even wanted to show it in the frame a little bit in the corner. All right, see you guys next time. If I don't see you before Christmas and New Year's, Happy New Year's, Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas, and see you next year. Or maybe I will see you once again before Christmas. We'll see what I will end up doing. So yeah, take care, clear skies, have some fun with the moon, and see you later. Bye bye.